Aloha, this is Bill Nahalea, and welcome to another episode of Native Ways, a show about Native Americans and Native Hawaiians and those who are Native at heart. Aloha, and we have a very special guest here, Kumu Hula Master Gloria Napualani. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. You know, one of the questions I want to ask you is a little background of who you are and how did you really get involved in hula here?
Well, first of all, I'm not Hawaiian descent, and I was born in the islands of Philippines, and my family was in the military, so we moved to the island of Oahu. And while I was there, I was quite young. I was about 3 when we moved to Hawaii. While we were there, I was very sick, and I loved the islands of Hawaii. I knew that when I landed there, that's where I was from. I knew that that's where I should be staying forever and ever and ever. But being that my father was in the military, I did have to follow my dad. I was too young to be able to take care of myself. But I started off in learning more about it, having an interest in hula when I was living there, because everywhere we went, there was always hula. And I was really drawn to it, and I just knew, and at one point I remember asking my mom, I don't think I'm Filipino at all. I think I'm Hawaiian. And of course they're laughing at me going, I don't know about that. And so I grew up in Wailua, and it's very much out in the country, over by where the kukui nut factory used to be. That's the area I had lived up near Haleiwa and Wailua. Well, one thing I realized was that because I was so drawn to the music and I was so drawn to everything about Hawaii, many years later when I had to follow my dad to the United States, he was stationed here, I left. And when I left, I realized that I'd already been introduced to the hula, backyard style hula, where all the families would get together and I'd watch, and I'd get up and dance with some of the rest of the other family members and aunties and uncles. Well, when I realized that I was never going to have it again, I moved up here to Washington, first down in California and then up to Washington. And while I was here, I had just missed the islands. I missed all of that hula, and I remember asking my mom and dad if I can go back home and live, and they would say, well, this is your home. I'm going, no, it's not, it's back over there. And so I had missed it so much, and I was really blessed because there was a Hawaiian woman who was the mother of my best friend. And when she saw me dance, she said, I really want you and the kids to dance with my daughter, and let me just begin to teach you the hula. And that's how I got started. And her name was Lehua Persing, and I just remember what a beautiful woman she was. She had the beautiful long hair, and at that time I was painfully shy and couldn't even talk in front of anybody. But through music and through the hula, I could express. And so that's where I started. And through being here and learning, I was exposed to other kumu hulas who had come in and began to teach here. And so from there, I began to learn more about the dances of the hula. I met Uncle George. Uncle George Naopi was one of the co-founders of Merry Monarch Hula Festival that's held every year in the islands of the Big Island in Hilo. And under his tutelage, he just mentored me and continued to, he found something in me, and I think the connection we had when I met him and I started dancing and working with him, he actually asked me if I was, because my last name at the time was Fuji, and he had said that his very first kumu hula, her name was Fuji. And so that connection, we drew a connection there. And as we continued to dance and learned, at one point he had mentioned to me that I reminded him in dancing of another great hula teacher, Iolani Luahine. And when he mentioned that, I didn't know who she was, so I went and looked her up and tried to find out who this woman was. And she came here to this facility we're at, and she had performed and did some hula workshops. And she did a no-hold style hula where she was down on the floor and rolled on the floor and came back up, and she was so graceful. She looked like she might have been 16, 17, 18 in the way she moved. But there was something about her that I just connected, and I remember her looking right at me at that time and said, "My dear, you need to continue teaching hula and dancing." And at that time, I was too young. I didn't understand what all of that was. I mean, I was probably, by that time, I was in my teens, late teens, and continued on from then. I knew enough about the hula and the Hawaiian culture that when someone tells you that that's where you need to go, I learned and knew that that was where I needed to follow, and that's where it's been since. I tried to fight it, but here I am 40 years later, and I'm still teaching.
Yeah, this is one thing I was going to ask you about Uncle George. He's since passed, yeah. But his way of teaching, the old style, because what you teach here is Awana and Kahiko, right? Can you explain what is Awana and Kahiko?
There are two disciplines of hula. Kahiko is the dance of the old, and this is it's a way to perpetuate our ancestors of all of our hula masters, their style of dancing and telling a story of our ancient history of Hawaii, because Hawaii is an oral history kind of a culture. And of course, then now we're educated, we have our own alphabet and all of that, but that's Kahiko means old, and it's preserving the old hula through the stories, and it's through that preservation that keeps the hula alive. Awana is just a hula of today that is generally accompanied with music, ukulele, guitar, all kinds of the string instruments. So that's the difference. The Awana is more, people relate to Awana differently, probably to the folks who would not, doesn't know a lot about the hula. That's what appeals to them. The Kahiko does appeal to a lot of people as well because of its historical aspects. Both are very rich in their art form, very different and very different styling. Their costuming is different. So that's the difference between Kahiko and Awana, and I do try to teach that here.
We appreciate it, your time. Mahalo. We're going to be actually looking at some of the dancers today. Right after this, we're going to go in the studio and see some of the hula dancers.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll be interested. It'll be really interesting to see our dancers, because they're not. A lot of my dancers are not of Hawaiian descent.
Mahalo for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, that was a good one for Kavika.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, I know you've been a Kumu for a number of years here in Seattle, and you have a number of haumana throughout the region. Yeah, how many years have you really taught here in Seattle?
Well, I've been one of the longest teachers teaching in this area. I started teaching when I was in University of Washington, and had an opportunity to begin to teach while I was working with Aloha Airlines and Pleasant Hawaiian Holidays. And it was really wonderful because it was a way for me to supplement my going to school income. And I actually started teaching not because of just something I wanted to do. I had some of my friends ask me to come in and begin to teach, and I started teaching out of my little dorm little room with little kids, and really had a great time with that. So I'm gonna say I've been teaching probably for close to 40 years.
40 years. So if I understand this, weren't you the first, or is the longest, oldest halau in the state back in 1977, I think it was?
I didn't formally get started as a halau until I had my blessings from my Uncle George Naope. With my Kumu Hula, and he had mentioned to me that I had a responsibility. My kuleana was to be able to continue teaching the dance of the hula and the arts. And so that's what I've been doing. I stumbled into it. It was something that it started off as a hobby, and it has become a lifelong passion. And I've just enjoyed teaching and sharing our cultures of our islands. I miss home a lot. And one of the things that I had realized was the one unique thing that we have in the islands was our aloha spirit. And a lot of people go and flock to the islands of Hawaii. The tourism grows, and it's a place where it's magical. People love the islands, and they love the hula. There's something about the hula that talks to them. And so that's one of the things that I like to make sure that our haumana that are here, majority of them that I work with, are not of Hawaiian descent. And so it's just fabulous that they would embrace our culture.
You know, one of the things that, and I had a chance to go through the book, Kumu Hula, and there was mention of 6 revered kumus, and actually you were one of them, talking about the pala pala procedures of what you go through, the process of getting your pala pala, and you went through the old style of getting, or the degree of making a certified kumu.
The pala pala is a very special honor, where it is very much like getting a master's of the dance. It's like getting a master's degree, and it's not something that necessarily people go to. There's not like a school of a college of hula. So when I received mine, it was based on a merit situation. I believe that when Uncle George, I was training with him, I believe that the reason that I received it, it wasn't something I asked for. I wasn't seeking for that kind of recognition or that kind of an honor. I believe that it happened because of my love for teaching, and that I was working and really diligent about learning the right thing to learn. We were taught that you didn't ask a lot of questions, but you needed to just be very quiet and listen and observe and absorb as much of what your kumu hula was sharing with you. And I believe that I had demonstrated that. Uncle George was very generous with his knowledge. He presented a lot of wonderful information to me, and took me on, more or less tutoring me, and I really just enjoyed getting the training. I miss Uncle George because he would answer a lot of things, and he would not answer a lot of things where I had to learn it on my own, or he would point me in the right direction and resources. He encouraged me to always be learning as much as I can from as many of the wonderful kumus who have shared. They were very generous with their knowledge, and as they sought me, they would give me permission to go ahead and continue to teach. There's a lot of material that I was asked not to teach, but for the most part, they've given me permission to share. And I'm really blessed with a lot of that giving of the knowledge that they freely gave it to me.
Awesome. One of the things, this is a real simple question. What draws a special student to hula, well, particularly your halau? What draws them here?
That's a really interesting question. I believe that first thing that they do is if they've been to the islands and have had a little bit of exposure to the culture, they're drawn to the beautiful hula dancer that is executes a story. Their expressions of their story, they're graceful. But there's something magical about watching a hula dancer that can embrace the dance and tell that story, where they can engage the viewer who's watching it, whether it's an audience or their parents or their grandparents or family. There's just something that draws people. I think it's like a heart-to-heart kind of connection. And so that's the first thing that they come here for. The second thing they come for is for conditioning and for exercise. Others want to just learn a little bit more about our culture, and it's a way for them to learn about our culture from dancing the hula, because in our classes, I do try to give them as much of the same kind of feeling and like they're raised in Hawaii. Because there we have the air. You step into the islands and you can feel it. You can feel the air is warm, it's embracing. You can smell the flowers. I mean, it's like all of your senses are being, I guess you're being exposed to all of your senses, and so I think that there's that. So those are the combinations. Others come because a friend of them invited them to come to the class and to try it out, and they like it, they stick it out, and it's they're enriched by it.
We're actually here in one of the studios that you teach here in Seattle. We're here in the University District, not too far from the University of Washington. You have a number of locations throughout Washington State, right?
I do, and it's an interesting place that we're in the University District, because this is where I actually started this area was where I started my career in teaching. Wow. I was going to college, and this is the area I started. And from there, I am in 4 different locations throughout Puget Sound.
just put on your thinking caps for the next time you dance this one. Is just watch your line up. Okay, that's I can't wander around back there. You just want to make sure that when you're dancing, your dancers are right in line. Okay.
Kumu Hula Master Gloria, what are your plans in the coming years with the halau?
You know, I've had such a great length of time working with our haumana, and I've seen many of them start off as keiki, young children, and growing up to today they are their own moms and have their own children. So it's been a joy to watch the growth of the hula grow here in this area, and I've been blessed to be able to share the hula with a lot of folks. So my future plans is I'm actually working on a like a guidebook because as my haumana continued to grow, I've never actually had collected all of my material of my music and the choreographies. Mm-hmm. I'm working on putting together a book that they can actually resource back to. Of all the different kumu hulas that have shared with me and some of the things that they have wanted to make sure that our haumana know important information about the hula. We had in the past have done some Tahitian and hula competitions. I also teach hula and Tahitian and New Zealand Maori dancing. Okay. So we've expanded to the South Pacific Islands. But futuristically, I plan on continuing to have more workshops, more conferences, more educational topic-oriented classes, giving more in-depth about the hula, because there's so much more to it in terms of costuming, how to make them, how to care for them, and what its purpose are, and in relationship to the hula. Our group right now is gathering as much fundraising projects as they can, because we're planning on taking the group halau to the World Hula Conference. It happens every 4 years. It's going to be held this next year in 2014 in Kauai, Lihue. And so I'm excited about bringing this whole group there and get a chance to be able to see some of the places, locations of where the hula, the stories that we talk about of the hula. For example, we'll be in Kauai, so they'll visit a place called Koke'e near Waimea Valley, and they'll go and visit a place called Nahalea. They'll go and see where the taro patches are there, and learn about our songs that are related to the islands of Hawaii. So that's what our plans are for at least in the most immediate. And I'm going to continue teaching. Recently, in the last several years, I've had an opportunity to be able to work with the University of Washington, Western Washington University, the Whitman College, where they have asked me to come in and be a guest speaker and sharing about our cultures. And what's really fun about that is through the college students, we're going to get a chance to do our own little luau's, where they learn about, I don't know if campus will let us dig up any holes to make our own little imu, but we're going to go and check that out. Maybe I'll get kicked out of one of the colleges if we do that, but we are going to help them learn more about how the ways of the foods and how we used to eat and do our thing in the islands of Hawaii. Learn more about the foods, the taro, and the benefits of that. And
I guess the other question, real quick, is what do you want to see out of a hula student when they come to any of your classes?
I just want to make sure that they have the heart of wanting to understand the hula, that it's not necessarily something where they're coming in for the glitz and the glamour and to be the top prima donna dancer. I want them to be able to understand and embrace our culture, really understand. Like we greet one another with a honi honi and the aloha. I would like for my dancers to be able to have that whole value systems of the islands of Hawaii. I think it just makes them a better person. And if they can express themselves and express the dances and share what the stories are all about, and convey that to to whoever's watching. That's what I want them to come out of that. I want them to be able to have the pure joy of dancing and the hula, where it empowers them. If they're feeling good about something that they're dancing, they're going home happier, and when they're getting home happier, their families are happier, and their families are going to support what they're doing. And so I want them to be able to have this as part of their lifestyle. And a lot of my dancers actually, they become what we call a hula-holic. They just love it. They'll just, anytime I have a class or rehearsal, they're right there. They want to come in and enjoy.
So how can anyone, our viewers, get in touch with you?
Well, they can get me on my email or on my website. It's www.halauhulaonapualani, which is my name. And so, but I'm really glad that I'm having this opportunity to be able to share that hula is live and well here in the Northwest, Pacific
Awesome.
Northwest.
Awesome. We thank you so much for sharing your time because your busy schedule. So thank you, Napua. Mahalo so much.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again sometime. Mahalo.